They laughed at him for working selling lemonade, but no one imagined who his father was. The midday sun beat down mercilessly on Oak Valley's Central Square, a picturesque spot in this affluent Connecticut town where old money and new fortunes mingled beneath centuries-old maple trees. 17-year-old Ethan Miller wiped sweat from his brow as he arranged lemons in a neat pyramid beside his makeshift lemonade stand. The simple wooden structure looked painfully out of place amid the town's manicured perfection. $3? You're charging $3 for lemonade. Blake Thompson snorted, his designer sunglasses perched on his perfectly styled hair. Behind him, Madison Carter and Tyler Wilson struggled to contain their laughter, phones already raised to capture what they considered prime social media material. Ethan straightened his shoulders. It's fresh squeezed, made with filtered water and organic honey. How quaint, Madison drawled, her diamond earrings catching the sunlight as she tilted her head to get a better angle for her video. Our Ethan's gone full kindergarten entrepreneur. What? They didn't know what nobody at Westridge Academy knew, was that Ethan's father, James Miller, owned Miller Enterprises, the development company responsible for half the commercial real estate in the state. The same company that had recently acquired the mall where Blake's father rented space for his struggling insurance agency. 3 weeks earlier, James Miller had summoned Ethan to his home office, the sanctum of mahogany and leather, where million-dollar decisions were made daily. Your grades are excellent, James had said, reviewing Ethan's end-of-year report, but grades aren't everything. Ethan had shifted uncomfortably in the leather chair across from his father's massive desk. Since his mother, Sarah's passing 5 years ago, these father-son meetings had become increasingly formal. I'm giving you a challenge this summer, James continued. Start a business. Any business. But you'll do it without the Miller name, without my money, without any advantages except what's in here. He tapped his temple. By September, I want to see what you're capable of on your own. Now, as Blake and his entourage walked away laughing, Ethan questioned whether accepting his father's challenge had been wise. He'd chosen a lemonade stand for its simplicity and low startup costs, using $200 of his own savings. His father had seemed almost disappointed at the modest choice, but Ethan had a plan. Start small, learn the basics, then expand. Young man, I'll take a glass of your, say, lemonade. Ethan looked up to see an elderly woman with silver hair and bright, intelligent eyes. She wore a simple sundress that had seen better days, but her posture and demeanor suggested dignity beyond her apparent means. Of course, ma'am, Ethan poured a generous serving, adding a mint leaf as garnish. I'm Eleanor Winters, she said, taking a sip. My goodness, this is delightful. Just the right balance of tart and sweet. Ethan smiled genuinely for the first time that day. Thank you, Ms. Winters. Mrs., she corrected gently, though Mr. Winters has been gone 17 years now. She studied him with curious eyes. You're not doing this for pocket money, are you? There's something different about you. Ethan hesitated. I'm trying to learn something. The best reason to do anything, Eleanor nodded approvingly. You know, when I was younger, I made a lemonade that won ribbons at the county fair. The secret was a touch of lavender honey and just a whisper of orange blossom. As Eleanor shared her recipe, Ethan listened intently, taking mental notes. What he didn't know was that Eleanor Winters had been one of the first investors in Miller Enterprises 30 years ago, or that she still held regular lunches with his father. By late afternoon, Ethan had sold only 12 glasses of lemonade. As he packed up his supplies, his phone buzzed with notifications. His stomach sank as he opened Instagram to find himself featured in a series of posts. Trust fund baby playing poor for summer fun. When daddy's credit card gets cut off, Ethan Miller lemon failure. The worst was Blake's post, a slow-motion video of Ethan earnestly explaining his lemonade's quality, captioned, "When you peak in elementary school. Lemon loser." Within an hour, the posts had circulated among most of Westridge Academy's student body. Ethan's phone continued to vibrate with messages, mostly laughing emojis and mocking comments. At home, a modest colonial that belied the Miller fortune, Ethan found his father in the kitchen preparing dinner. Since Sarah's passing, James had insisted on maintaining some semblance of normal family life, including cooking dinner whenever he wasn't traveling. "How was day one?" James asked, carefully dicing onions for what smelled like his signature. "Pasta sauce. 12 sales. $36 gross, maybe 15 net. After expenses." Ethan placed his box of supplies on the counter. James nodded, neither impressed nor disappointed. "And what did you learn?" "That my classmates are jerks." "That's not a business lesson," James said evenly. "Try again." Ethan thought for a moment. "Location matters. The square gets foot traffic, but not the right kind. Most people passing through are either tourists who already bought drinks elsewhere or locals running errands who aren't stopping for refreshments." A hint of approval flashed in James's eyes. "Better. What else?" "My product isn't differentiated enough. It's good lemonade, but there's nothing special about it that justifies the price or creates word of mouth." James returned to his cooking. "Not bad for day one. What's your plan for tomorrow?" "I met someone today, Mrs. Winters, who gave me some ideas for new recipes. I'm going to experiment tonight and try a new approach tomorrow." James's knife paused momentarily at the mention of Eleanor's name, but he continued chopping without comment. That night, Ethan researched artisanal lemonades online, ordered a few specialty ingredients for express delivery, and sketched ideas for improving his stand's appearance. Around midnight, his phone chimed with a text from Zoe Parker, a quiet girl from his chemistry class. "Saw the posts. Not everyone thinks it's funny. Some of us respect the hustle. Need help tomorrow?" Ethan stared at the message, surprised. Zoe wasn't part of Blake's affluent circle. Her mother owned a small flower shop downtown, and Zoe worked there after school. They'd partnered on a few lab assignments but never socialized outside class. "Thanks, but I'm okay," he replied after consideration. "I appreciate the support, though." Her response came quickly. "Your call, but FYI, Summer Festival Committee meeting tomorrow. They're finalizing vendor applications. 4 p.m. at Town Hall. Last chance to get a booth." The annual Oak Valley Summer Festival was the town's biggest event, drawing thousands of visitors over the August weekend. A vendor spot would be perfect, but the application deadline had passed weeks ago, and spots were notoriously difficult to secure. "How do you know this?" he texted back. "Mom's on the committee. Booth fees are steep, though, $500 for the weekend." Ethan did quick mental math. At his current rate, it would take weeks to save that much. Weeks he didn't have. The festival was just over a month away. "Thanks for the tip," he wrote, already formulating a plan. Before going to sleep, Ethan checked social media once more. The mockery had expanded, with someone creating a dedicated meme page, "Lemonade Boy, Oak Valley's neediest trust fund kid." His jaw tightened as he scrolled through dozens of variations on the theme. What Ethan didn't see was his father standing in his doorway for a brief moment, watching his son's reaction to the online ridicule. James Miller's expression softened with a mixture of sympathy and determination before he quietly returned to his own room. At dawn, Ethan was already awake, scribbling in a notebook. By the time the sun had fully risen over Oak Valley, he had a 7-day plan drafted. The lemonade stand was just the beginning. His classmates might be laughing now, but Ethan Miller was his father's son after all, and Millers knew how to turn lemons into something far more valuable than lemonade. The next morning arrived with an unexpected development. A local news blog had picked up Blake's viral post, transforming it into a brief human interest story. Local teens' old-fashioned enterprise meets modern mockery. The article was sympathetic, but did Ethan no favors by emphasizing the quaint and charmingly outdated nature of his business venture. Ethan's phone rang as he was setting up his stand, this time with a new tablecloth and professionally printed price list. "I just saw that stupid article," his father said without preamble. "Do you want me to have it taken down?" "No," Ethan replied after a moment's consideration. "Any publicity is good publicity, right? Besides, I'd rather earn respect than have you clear the path." A pause. "Good answer. Just remember, how you respond to setbacks defines you more than the setbacks themselves." By 10 a.m., Ethan's revamped stand was ready. He'd followed Eleanor's recipe suggestions, creating 3 specialty lemonades: lavender honey, strawberry basil, and spiced orange blossom. He'd also upgraded his signage, naming his venture Mill Valley Refreshment Company, a subtle nod to his surname that wouldn't raise suspicions. Well, the lemonade loser returns. Blake sauntered up, flanked by Tyler and 2 other Westridge baseball players. Saw you made the news. My post got 3,000 shares, by the way. You're welcome for the exposure. Ethan maintained his composure. Thanks for stopping by. Would you like to try today's special on the house? Blake was momentarily thrown off balance by the lack of defensiveness. You're offering me free lemonade after what I posted. Consider it market research, Ethan said, pouring a sample of the lavender honey lemonade. I value all customer feedback, especially from influential people. The calculated response and implied flattery caught Blake off guard. He accepted the small cup, sipped, and failed to hide his surprise at the taste. Not bad, he admitted grudgingly. What's in this? Family secret, Ethan replied with a knowing smile. But if you post a positive review, I might share some details. Blake snorted, but Tyler unexpectedly pulled out his wallet. I'll take a large of whatever that was. As Tyler paid, Madison appeared, curiosity evident beneath her practiced indifference. What are you losers doing? Taste this, Tyler insisted, offering her his cup. Madison's perfectly maintained skepticism cracked slightly as she sipped. That's actually good. By noon, word had spread. Ethan's stand had a small but steady stream of customers, including several of his classmates. Each new visitor validated his business in the eyes of others, creating a snowball effect of social acceptance. When Eleanor Winters arrived for her daily glass, she found herself waiting in a short line. I see you took my advice, she said approvingly when her turn came. The lavender is perfect, not too floral, just a hint. Your recipe was the key, Ethan acknowledged. I'd love to hear more of your stories sometime, Mrs. Winters. Oh, I've got plenty to share. Her eyes twinkled. I'll be here tomorrow. Same time. As Eleanor walked away, Ethan noticed her stop to chat with Mayor Wilson, Tyler's father, who was doing his usual midday walk through the square. They appeared familiar with each other, though Ethan couldn't hear their conversation. Baiksang. Closing time, Ethan had made 127 tars, a significant improvement over yesterday. As he packed up, Zoe Parker approached, her curly hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. Looks like you didn't need my help after all, she observed, helping him fold his tablecloth. I wouldn't say that. Your festival tip was solid gold. I'm heading to the meeting now. Mom texted that they're running late. We've got time for coffee if you want to talk strategy. She gestured toward Perkins' coffee house across the square. I worked there last summer. The manager likes me. 20 minutes later, they sat in a quiet corner of the cafe, Ethan's business notebook open between them. Festival booths are assigned by seniority and clout, Zoe explained, sketching a rough map. The premium spots near the main stage go to major sponsors and businesses that have participated for years. First-timers usually get stuck here. She circled an area far from the primary attractions, behind the portable toilets. Ethan frowned. That's not workable. There's another option, Zoe said hesitantly. Mobile vendors. The festival added a few roaming seller permits last year for artisanal ice cream carts. Lower fees, no fixed location. Perfect, Ethan brightened. How much? $200, but there's a catch. They're reserved for established downtown businesses. Ethan's excitement dimmed. So I'm back to square one. Not necessarily, Zoe sipped her coffee thoughtfully. My mom's flower shop qualifies. She could sponsor your application. Why would she do that? Because I'd ask her to, Zoe replied simply, and because she believes in giving kids a chance. My brother started his graphic design business using our address when he was in high school. Before Ethan could respond, the cafe door opened and James Miller walked in. He froze momentarily upon seeing Ethan, clearly not expecting to find his son there. A flicker of recognition crossed his face at the sight of Zoe, though they'd never been introduced. Dad, Ethan said, surprised. This is Zoe Parker from school. Zoe, my father. Mr. Miller, Zoe nodded politely. I was just telling Ethan about the festival vendor opportunities. James's expression remained neutral, but Ethan caught the flash of assessment in his father's eyes as he evaluated both Zoe and the situation. Don't let me interrupt, James said, ordering his coffee to go and finding a seat at the far end of the cafe. When James left a few minutes later with his coffee, Ethan felt a familiar pressure, the weight of his father's unstated expectations. Your dad seems intense, Zoe observed. He is, Ethan agreed. So about that mobile vendor. Permit. 2 hours later, Ethan left Town Hall with an approved application for a mobile refreshment cart at the Oak Valley Summer Festival, sponsored by Parker's Flowers, with a $200 fee paid from his day's earnings. Mayor Wilson had raised an eyebrow at the arrangement, but offered no objections, particularly after Mrs. Parker enthusiastically vouched for Ethan's entrepreneurial spirit and commitment to local ingredients. As they walked back through the square, Zoe handed Ethan a business card. My brother Josh, he does branding and design, said he'd help with your logo and packaging as a favor to me. I can't ask you to do all this, Ethan protested. You're not asking. I'm offering. Zoe hesitated. Look, not everyone at Westridge is like Blake. Some of us actually have to work for things. The unspoken implication hung in the air that she assumed Ethan came from modest means, unlike their wealthy classmates. I appreciate that, he said carefully, maintaining his cover while feeling increasingly uncomfortable with the deception. Back home, Ethan found his father in the garden, tending to Sarah's roses, a task James had taken over after her passing and never delegated to their gardener. The Parker girl, James said as Ethan approached. Her mother owns the flower shop downtown. Good people. She's helping me with the festival, Ethan admitted. I got a mobile vendor permit. It's less expensive and might actually be better for business. James nodded, his focus on pruning a particularly vigorous climbing rose. Creative solution. Your mother would approve. The rare mention of Sarah caught Ethan off guard. You think so? She always said constraints breed creativity. James straightened, studying his son with unexpected softness. Your online tormentors still at it? They're becoming customers, Ethan said with satisfaction. Blake Thompson even complimented. My lemonade today, though he'd probably deny it. Interesting. James removed his gardening gloves. Blake's father came to see me yesterday. His lease at the Westfield Mall is up for renewal. He's asking for favorable terms. The implications weren't lost on Ethan. You're not going to let my situation influence a business decision, are you? James's expression revealed nothing. Every business decision has multiple factors. Tom Thompson has been a difficult tenant for years. Unreliable payments, constant complaints, demanding special treatment because we play golf at the same club. He shrugged. Your situation is irrelevant to those facts. That evening, Ethan worked on business projections while keeping an eye on social media. The tone of posts about his venture had shifted subtly. While still mostly mocking, there was an undercurrent of curiosity. Several comments questioned whether the lemonade was actually good, and a few people defended the concept of summer jobs regardless of family wealth. Just before midnight, Ethan received a text from an unknown number. Meeting tomorrow 9 a.m. Bring your business plan. JW. A quick search confirmed his suspicion. JW was Joshua Wilson, the festival chairman and Tyler's older brother who had returned from college for the summer to help with the family's political operations. The Wilson family's interest could be either an opportunity or a threat. As Ethan prepared for bed, he thought about Blake's father's lease situation and wondered if the Wilsons somehow knew about his true identity. His phone chimed with another notification. Blake had posted again, but this time the caption read, simply, hate to admit it, but a Lemonade Boy's new recipes are legit. Respect the hustle. Ethan smiled. Phase 1 of his plan was working, turning critics into customers. Now he needed to transform customers into advocates. The festival was still weeks away, but his path was becoming clearer. What remained unclear was how long he could maintain his facade and what would happen when the truth inevitably came to light. As he drifted off to sleep, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that his father's challenge involved lessons beyond business basics, lessons about identity, perception, and the true nature of respect. The meeting with Joshua Wilson at Oak Valley's upscale Riverside Bistro took an unexpected turn. Rather than the interrogation Ethan had anticipated, Joshua seemed genuinely interested in his business concept. "The festival needs to attract younger attendees," Joshua explained, stirring his third espresso of the morning. At 24, he had already completed an MBA and was being groomed to eventually take over his father's political legacy. "Your social media presence, even if it started as mockery, has created buzz. I'm not sure Lemonade Boy memes count as effective marketing," Ethan countered. "You'd be surprised." Joshua slid an iPad across the table, displaying analytics from various social media platforms. "Engagement around Oak Valley's festival is up 30% compared to last year, largely driven by conversations surrounding your enterprise." Ethan studied the data, impressed despite himself. Joshua Wilson might be part of a family Ethan's father considered political opportunists, but his business acumen was undeniable. "Here's my proposal," Joshua continued. "We upgrade your vendor status. Prime location near the main stage, no additional fee. In exchange, you collaborate with our social media team for cross-promotion." It was a generous offer, suspiciously so. "Why would you do this?" Joshua's smile was practiced but not entirely insincere. "Let's call it civic investment. Your little operation has captured attention. We're just channeling that energy." By the time Ethan left the bistro, he had secured a premier vendor location and acquired a new set of concerns about the Wilson family's motives. Those concerns were temporarily overshadowed by his growing business. Over the next week, Ethan's lemonade stand became an unexpected fixture in Oak Valley's square. He expanded his menu to 5 signature drinks, added locally baked cookies as companions to his beverages, and replaced his makeshift stand with a custom-built cart designed by Josh Parker. The daily visits from Eleanor Winters continued, evolving into informal mentoring sessions. She shared stories about Oak Valley's business history that Ethan found increasingly fascinating, particularly because they occasionally featured veiled references to his father's early career. "Your father and I haven't always seen eye to eye," Eleanor mentioned on her 7th consecutive visit, watching Ethan's reaction carefully. Ethan nearly dropped the glass he was filling. "You know who my father is?" Eleanor's eyes twinkled. "My dear boy, I've known your father since before you were born. I was at your parents' wedding." "Does everyone know?" Ethan asked, mortified at the possibility his cover was completely transparent. "No. Most people in this town see only what they expect to see. A boy from money wouldn't be selling lemonade, so you must not be from money." She patted his hand. "Your secret is safe with me. I'm simply curious about James's game here." "It's not a game," Ethan defended. "It's a challenge to learn business fundamentals without using family connections." "A worthy goal," Eleanor conceded, "though I suspect there's more to it than he's telling you." Before Ethan could press for clarification, dark clouds that had been gathering all morning finally erupted. Rain poured down with shocking intensity, sending people scattering for cover. Within seconds, Ethan's carefully arranged display was soaked. "My car's just around the corner," Eleanor said, already opening her umbrella. "Let's salvage what we can." But the sudden summer storm quickly became more than a mere inconvenience. As they struggled to pack Ethan's supplies, the wind intensified, transforming into a powerful gust that lifted his newly built cart and slammed it against the square's central fountain. Ethan watched in disbelief as the cart, representing a significant portion of his earnings and the cornerstone of his festival strategy, splintered against stone. "Oh, my dear," Eleanor murmured, her arm around his shoulders as rain plastered his hair to his forehead. "I'm so sorry." By evening, the storm had passed, but Ethan's business lay in ruins. His inventory was destroyed, his equipment damaged, beyond repair, and his carefully built momentum had vanished with the wind. He sat on his back porch, calculating the financial impact while his father prepared dinner inside. 3 weeks of progress gone, Ethan said when James joined him, offering a steaming mug of coffee. I'll have to start over, and the festival is less than a month away. James considered his son thoughtfully. Your mother's favorite quote was from Mike Tyson. Everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face. Despite his mood, Ethan smiled. Mom quoted Mike Tyson. More often than you'd think. James sipped his coffee. The point is valid. Real business resilience isn't built during easy times. Ethan's phone, which had been uncharacteristically silent for hours, suddenly chimed with multiple notifications. He opened his messages to find dozens of supportive texts from classmates, customers, and even strangers. Saw what happened to your stand. Need help rebuilding? My dad has carpentry tools. We could fix your cart this weekend. Don't give up, Lemonade Boy. Your drinks are the best thing in that boring square. The most surprising message came from Tyler Wilson. Blake's being a jerk about your cart getting destroyed. Told him to shut up. Some of us are meeting tomorrow to help rebuild. You in? James watched as Ethan scrolled through the messages, his expression softening. Seems you've made an impression. I don't understand, Ethan admitted. Half these people were mocking me 2 weeks ago. People respect persistence, James said simply, and perhaps they're not as shallow as you assumed. The next morning, Ethan arrived at the square to find a small crowd already gathered. Tyler and 3 other members of the baseball team, Zoe and her brother Josh, and several regular customers were clearing debris from his usual spot. Hope you don't mind, Josh called, waving a rolled blueprint. I took some liberties with the new design, more weather-resistant for one thing. Throughout the day, the impromptu rebuilding crew grew. By mid-afternoon, what had been a simple lemonade stand was transforming into a proper kiosk, complete with a reinforced structure, shelving, and a small awning. Mayor Wilson made a brief appearance, ostensibly to check that proper. Permits were in place but remaining to help install the counter. Even Blake Thompson eventually showed up, though he maintained a careful distance, observing rather than participating. As evening approached, Eleanor arrived with sandwiches for everyone, behaving less like the wealthy investor she was and more like someone's doting grandmother. I spoke with Harriet Johnson at the Farmers Market Association, she told Ethan quietly. She's agreed to front you replacement inventory at wholesale prices, payable after the festival. I can't accept that. Ethan protested. It's too much. It's not charity, Eleanor interrupted firmly. It's a business arrangement with favorable terms. Precisely the kind of opportunity a smart entrepreneur recognizes and accepts. By sunset, the new stand, considerably more impressive than its predecessor, was complete. As volunteers dispersed, with promises to return as customers, Ethan found himself facing an unexpected visitor, Blake Thompson, lingering awkwardly after the others had gone. My dad's lease got renewed yesterday, Blake said without preamble. Fixed rate for 5 years, and no annual increases. Ethan maintained a neutral expression. That's good news? It's unheard of. Nobody gets terms like that at Westfield Mall. Blake studied Ethan with newfound suspicion. Then this morning, Dad mentions meeting James Miller for lunch. Said Miller asked about me specifically. A trickle of unease ran down Ethan's spine. Sounds like your dad made a good impression. Here's the thing, Blake continued, taking a step closer. Miller doesn't do favors. Everyone knows that. So I'm wondering why he'd suddenly take interest in my father's struggling business and in me. Maybe he's diversifying his social circle, Ethan suggested, deflecting. Blake's eyes narrowed. There's something you're not telling me, and I'm going to figure out what it is. The threat, because it was unmistakably a threat, hung in the air as Blake walked away. Zoe emerged from behind the stand where she'd been organizing supplies. What was that about? Nothing, Ethan said automatically, then reconsidered. Actually, it might be something. Blake thinks there's a connection between me and James Miller. The developer? Zoe looked confused. Why would he think that? Ethan chose his words carefully. My dad and his dad have some business dealings. Don't all the dads in this town? Zoe shrugged, seemingly uninterested in pursuing the topic. Hey, I've been meaning to ask, would you want to go to the summer concert tomorrow night? The police shut it down last year, but they got permits this time. The invitation caught Ethan off guard. Like, together? As in a date? Or as business associates discussing strategy? Zoe replied with a smile that suggested she wasn't entirely serious about the business pretense. Your choice. Before Ethan could respond, his phone rang. It was Joshua Wilson, calling with exciting news about the festival promotion strategy. By the time the call ended, Zoe had disappeared, leaving Ethan with a complex mix of emotions: gratitude for the community support, anxiety about Blake's suspicions, excitement about his rebuilt business, and confusion about Zoe's invitation. Later, that night, as Ethan updated his business plan to account for his new circumstances, his father knocked on his bedroom door. "Mayor Wilson called," James said, without preamble, "mentioned quite the community effort on your behalf today." "It was unexpected," Ethan admitted. "I'm still processing it." "It appears you're learning valuable lessons," James observed, "though perhaps not the ones I anticipated." "What does that mean?" James considered his son thoughtfully. "You've discovered that business isn't conducted in isolation. It exists within a community, influenced by relationships and perceptions." "Is that why you renewed Blake's dad's lease with such favorable terms?" Ethan asked directly. If James was surprised by the question, he didn't show it. Tom Thompson received exactly the terms his business profile warranted. "Blake thinks you're taking a special interest in him." "Blake Thompson appears to have an inflated sense of his own importance," James replied mildly. "Not an uncommon trait among those who've never faced genuine adversity." The conversation left Ethan with more questions than answers, a feeling he was becoming accustomed to where his father was concerned. As he drifted off to sleep, his thoughts shifted between concern about Blake's suspicions, anticipation of Zoe's concert invitation, and pride in what he'd accomplished through the day's community effort. What Ethan couldn't know was that across town, 3 separate conversations were taking place about him. Blake Thompson was sharing his suspicions with his father, Eleanor Winters was having her weekly dinner with James Miller, and Mayor Wilson was discussing with his son Joshua how best to leverage the lemonade phenomenon for political advantage in the upcoming county election. The summer concert series at Oak Valley Park traditionally marked the halfway point of the season. As Ethan arrived, the grassy amphitheater was already crowded with townspeople on blankets and lawn chairs. A local indie band was setting up. On stage, their equipment illuminated by strings of vintage bulbs crisscrossing overhead. "For you actually came," Zoe said, appearing beside him with 2 glasses of what looked suspiciously like his own strawberry basil lemonade. "I snagged these from your stand. Mrs. Collins is watching it for you. Said sales are steady." Ethan accepted. The drink, impressed with both Zoe's initiative and the fact that his business continued operating without him. In just 3 weeks, he had created something with its own momentum. "Thanks for inviting me," he said, following her to a small hill with a perfect view of the stage. "I needed a break from planning." "The festival's still 2 weeks away," Zoe reminded him as they settled onto her picnic blanket. "Even entrepreneurs need downtime." As the band began their first set, Ethan found himself relaxing for the first time since accepting his father's challenge. The music was good, the evening air was perfect, and the company was unexpectedly comfortable. "So," Zoe said during a break between songs, "why is Blake Thompson suddenly obsessed with your mysterious connection to the Miller Empire?" Ethan nearly choked on his lemonade. "What?" "He cornered me after Econ study group yesterday. Asked all these weird questions about your family." She shrugged. "I told him I didn't know anything, which is true. You're weirdly private for someone who's become a local mini-celebrity." The band started playing again before Ethan could formulate a response. The reprieve gave him time to consider his options. The lie of omission he'd been maintaining felt increasingly uncomfortable, especially with Zoe. She had helped him without any expectation of return, seemingly just because she admired his work ethic. When the set ended, he turned to her. "What? Fair if I told you Blake isn't entirely wrong?" Zoe's expression remained neutral. "About the Miller connection?" "About." Ethan took a deep breath. about me having access to resources I haven't been utilizing. Understanding dawned in her eyes. You're not actually strapped for cash, are you? It's complicated. Ethan looked away, watching the crowd rather than meeting her gaze. My father issued a challenge. Start a business without using family connections or money. Prove I could succeed on my own merits. And the family business is? Significant, Ethan said carefully. Zoe was quiet for a long moment. So all this, the lemonade stand, the struggle, the community support, it's just a summer project? A character-building exercise before you go back to your regular, privileged life? The disappointment in her voice cut deeper than Ethan expected. That's not fair. The work is real. The business is real. But the stakes aren't. Zoe stood, brushing grass from her jeans. For you, failure means what? A valuable life lesson. For most people, failure means not making rent. Zoe, wait. I've got to help my mum with inventory tomorrow. Early start. Her voice was carefully controlled. Enjoy the rest of the concert. As Zoe walked away, Ethan felt a presence beside him. Blake Thompson dropped onto the blanket, unwelcome, but apparently undeterred by social niceties. Lovers quarrel? Blake asked with mock sympathy. What do you want, Blake? Confirmation. Blake stretched out comfortably. See, I've been doing some digging. You've got exactly one James Miller in your contacts, no dad entry. Your house is weirdly modest for Westridge tuition. And most telling, you've never once posted family photos online. Ethan maintained his poker face. Your point? At first I thought you might be James Miller's secret love child or something juicy like that. Blake grinned at Ethan's evident discomfort. But then my father mentioned that when Miller renewed our lease, he asked whether I was enjoying my educational summer experience, watching a true entrepreneur at work. His exact words, apparently. Ethan's stomach tightened. His father's subtle interference was becoming less subtle. You're James Miller's son, Blake concluded triumphantly. The heir to Miller Enterprises is slumming it selling lemonade while... We all laugh at the poor kid trying to make a few bucks. The accusation hung in the air between them. In the background, the band launched into their final song of the evening, a cover of a popular hit about pretending to be something you're not. I never. Claim to be poor, Ethan said finally. You never corrected anyone's assumptions either. Blake's expression hardened. You let everyone believe a lie. What exactly is your endgame here, Blake? Public humiliation? Because you've already tried that approach. Information is leverage, Miller. Blake stood, brushing off his designer jeans. I'm still deciding how best to use it. As Blake walked away, Ethan's phone buzzed with a text from his father. Meeting tomorrow with Festival Vendors Committee. Tem Town Hall. They've requested your attendance. The timing felt suspiciously convenient, as though James somehow knew Ethan's carefully constructed facade was crumbling. The vendor committee meeting turned out to be less about logistics and more about Ethan's expanding role in the festival. Joshua Wilson, clearly operating with his father's political instincts, had repositioned Mill Valley Refreshments as a centerpiece of the event's youth entrepreneurship showcase. We're adding a young business leaders panel, Joshua explained to the assembled committee members and vendors. Ethan will be our keynote speaker, sharing his journey from simple lemonade stand to... He gestured expansively. Whatever his operation evolves into by festival weekend. That's not what we agreed to, Ethan protested, conscious of the curious stares from established business owners around the table. Plans evolve, Mayor Wilson said smoothly. The public response to your resilience after the storm incident has been remarkable. We'd be foolish not to capitalize on the goodwill. It was clear to Ethan that he was being used for the Wilson family's political narrative, the plucky young entrepreneur rising from setbacks, nurtured by the mayor's visionary leadership. The irony that his own deception had created the opportunity wasn't lost on him. As the meeting dispersed, Eleanor Winters cornered him in the hallway. You're being manipulated, she said without preamble, though I suspect you've realized that already. By the Wilsons or by my father? Ethan asked wryly. Both in their own ways. Eleanor's usual twinkle was absent, replaced by genuine concern. The question is whether you'll continue playing their game or start playing your own. Before Ethan could respond, James Miller himself appeared at the end of the hallway, his presence immediately drawing attention from everyone nearby. As the CEO of Miller Enterprises, his visits to Town Hall were rare and typically signaled major development announcements. "Is that?" Joshua Wilson's voice carried down the corridor, his excitement palpable even at a distance. "My father," Ethan confirmed quietly. Eleanor squeezed his arm. "Time to decide whose game you're playing, dear boy." James approached with the confident stride of someone accustomed to commanding rooms. He nodded respectfully to Eleanor before turning to his son. "I thought I might observe this meeting," he explained, "given that your venture has apparently become central to the festival's marketing strategy." Before Ethan could respond, Mayor Wilson bustled over, hand extended. "James, what an unexpected pleasure. We were just discussing the youth entrepreneurship program. Your son's been quite an inspiration." "Has he?" James's tone revealed nothing of his thoughts. How fortunate that Oak Valley's youth have such attentive leadership. The subtle emphasis wasn't lost on Mayor Wilson, whose politician's smile faltered momentarily. "Well, we try to nurture local talent. In fact, we were hoping Ethan might share some insights at our business leaders panel. Without revealing his connection to Miller Enterprises, I assume," James asked mildly. The statement landed like a bomb in the hallway. Conversations stopped as heads turned toward them. Joshua Wilson's eyes widened in what appeared to be genuine shock, while Mayor Wilson's expression cycled rapidly through surprise, calculation, and finally forced joviality. "Well now, that's an interesting development," the mayor recovered quickly. "Makes the story even more compelling. Heir to a business empire starting from scratch to prove himself. The press will love it." Ethan stared at his father in disbelief. With a few casual words, James had demolished the premise of his summer challenge. The secret that Ethan had been protecting, that Blake had been threatening to expose, was now public knowledge. "Dad," Ethan managed through clenched teeth, "could we discuss this privately?" "Certainly," James agreed pleasantly, "though I'm not sure what aspect requires privacy at this point." As they moved toward an empty conference room, Ethan caught sight of Zoe at the far end of the hallway, apparently having witnessed the entire exchange. Her expression was unreadable as she turned and walked away. Inside the conference room, Ethan rounded on his father. "Why would you do that? The whole point was building something without the Miller name." "The point," James corrected calmly, "was learning to build something without relying on the Miller resources or connections. Your identity was always your own. But now, everyone will think what they choose to think. That's outside your control." James sat at the conference table, indicating that Ethan should do the same. "What matters is what you do next." "What do you mean?" "The Wilsons were using your perceived status as an underprivileged youth overcoming adversity. Now they'll use your status as a privileged youth choosing humility and hard work. Either way, they're using you." Ethan absorbed this, recognizing the truth in it. "So, what's your advice?" "Use them back," James said simply. "Every business relationship is ultimately transactional. The question is whether all parties receive fair value." By the time they left Town Hall, a modified plan was in place. Ethan would participate in the Young Entrepreneurs panel, acknowledging his family background while emphasizing that his business operated entirely independently. In exchange, his Mill Valley Refreshments would receive prime festival placement and marketing support, plus an opportunity to pitch his products to regional distributors attending the event. Outside, Blake Thompson was waiting, his expression a mixture of triumph and confusion. "Your father just stole my leverage," he said accusingly. "Apparently so," Ethan agreed, "though I'm not sure what you hope to accomplish with it anyway." Blake seemed genuinely perplexed by the turn of events. It was supposed to be this big dramatic revelation. Everyone would see you'd been manipulating them. Was I manipulating people? You were. Blake struggled to articulate his grievance. You made everyone look stupid for underestimating you. Maybe that says more about the assumptions people make than it does about me. Ethan started walking toward the square, where his lemonade stand awaited. After a moment, Blake fell into step beside him. "So what happens now?" Blake asked, sounding oddly deflated. "You go back to being James Miller's son and forget about the lemonade business?" "On the contrary," Ethan replied, a new determination settling over him. "Now I prove that my success had nothing to do with my last name." What Ethan didn't say, what he was still processing himself, was that the revelation had been oddly liberating. The pretense was gone, but the challenge remained. Now it wasn't about hiding who he was, but about demonstrating what he could accomplish despite who he was. As they approached the square, Ethan could see that business at his stand continued briskly even in his absence. Mrs. Collins, the retired economics teacher who had volunteered to cover his shift, was efficiently serving a line of customers, while explaining the concept of marginal utility to anyone who would listen. Blake surveyed the operation with newfound respect. "You know, if you're looking for festival staff, I might be available." The offer, thinly disguised as a favor, made Ethan smile despite himself. "You'd have to follow my instructions and wear the uniform apron." "For minimum wage, no way." "For experience," Ethan countered, "and commission on sales above daily targets." Blake considered this, his entrepreneurial interest clearly piqued. "I want creative input on new recipes." "You can submit proposals for consideration." "Deal." Blake extended his hand, which Ethan shook with only slight hesitation. As Blake walked away, Ethan spotted Zoe crossing the square, deliberately avoiding eye contact. The personal cost of his revelation might be higher than the business advantages. He started toward her, but his phone chimed with a news alert. Breaking Miller Air behind summer lemonade sensation, Oak Valley Gazette. The news cycle was already spinning his story. Whatever happened next would unfold in the public eye. The festival was less than 2 weeks away, and Ethan had a choice to make: retreat from the attention or leverage it to build something lasting. Eleanor's words echoed in his mind. "Time to decide whose game you're playing." Looking at his humble stand, now rebuilt better than before through community effort, Ethan made his decision. He would play his own game by his own rules. The revelation of his identity wasn't the end of his challenge, it was merely the beginning of its most difficult phase. The 2 weeks leading up to the Oak Valley Summer Festival transformed Mill Valley Refreshments from a local curiosity into a legitimate business enterprise. The revelation of Ethan's identity had precisely the opposite effect of what he had feared. Instead of diminishing his accomplishments, it magnified them. The heir to Miller Enterprises, choosing to build something from scratch, captured the town's imagination. Local media coverage expanded beyond Oak Valley. Regional news outlets picked up the story, framing it as "Millionaire's Son Proves His Worth," complete with features on the revitalized town square where his business had started. The narrative wasn't entirely accurate. Ethan hadn't revitalized anything single-handedly, but the attention brought increased foot traffic to downtown businesses. The Friday morning of the festival dawned clear and hot. Perfect weather for selling cold beverages. Ethan arrived at the fairgrounds at 5 a.m. to oversee the setup of his booth, now a substantial installation with professional signage, refrigeration, equipment, and a team of 6 employees, including Blake Thompson. "I still can't believe you got the iced coffee franchise," Blake grumbled as he helped unload supplies. The partnership with a local roaster to sell cold brew coffee alongside Ethan's signature lemonades had been Blake's idea, though he was reluctant to take credit for it. "Your suggestion? My negotiation skills," Ethan reminded him. In the week since their unexpected alliance, Blake had proven to be a surprisingly valuable teammate. His social media savvy and network of connections among Oak Valley's youth had accelerated their pre-festival marketing beyond what Ethan could have achieved alone. "Whatever," Blake shrugged, but Ethan caught the hint of pride in his expression. "Is Zoe coming today?" The question was casual but loaded. Zoe hadn't spoken to Ethan since the town hall revelation, ignoring his calls and texts. Her mother had politely but firmly told him that Zoe was processing things when he'd stopped by the flower shop. "I don't know," Ethan admitted. "She's volunteering at the craft pavilion, but But she's still pissed that you let her believe you were a regular working-class hero, Blake finished, displaying unexpected insight. Can't blame her. You basically catfished your whole identity. I never lied about who I was, Ethan protested, though the defense felt increasingly hollow. I just didn't volunteer certain information. Lies of omission still count, man. Blake stacked cups with surprising efficiency, especially when you let her think you were struggling financially while she was helping you. Ethan had no response to that uncomfortable truth. His phone buzzed with a message from Joshua Wilson. Media arriving at 10. Mayor wants photos with you at your booth before the official opening. Panel discussion still 2 p.m. Bring your A game. Joshua's interest in Ethan's operation had intensified since the revelation, with the political implications now extending beyond the local festival. The Wilson family clearly saw opportunity in their association with both the Miller name and Ethan's bootstrapping narrative. By 9 a.m., the festival grounds were buzzing with vendors making final preparations. Ethan's booth, strategically positioned between the main stage and the food court, was nearly ready. His expanded team included 2 Westridge classmates, Blake and Mrs. Collins, whose economics lessons had proven surprisingly relevant to real-world business operations. Mr. Miller, a familiar voice called. Eleanor Winters approached, looking remarkably spry despite the early hour. Your father asked me to deliver this. She handed Ethan an envelope. Inside was a brief note in his father's precise handwriting. The final test isn't how you handle adversity, but how you manage success. Don't let today's spotlight distract from tomorrow's foundation building. Dad. Also enclosed was a business card for Gregory Simmons, CEO of Regional Distributors Incoeat, with a handwritten note. Interested in your product line? Find me at the VIP reception. He could have texted this, Ethan remarked, pocketing the card. James appreciates the personal touch in important communications, Eleanor replied, and he wanted to give you something tangible without appearing directly involved in your venture. Before Ethan could respond, a commotion near the entrance caught their attention. Mayor Wilson had arrived with his entourage of staff, local officials and media representatives. Showtime, Blake muttered, adjusting his Mill Valley Refreshments cap. The next hour passed in a blur of handshakes, posed photographs, and carefully rehearsed sound bites about entrepreneurship and community. Mayor Wilson positioned himself as Ethan's mentor and champion, while Joshua worked the media angles, ensuring that every outlet received their exclusive moment with Oak Valley's youngest business success story. By the time the festival officially opened at noon, Ethan was exhausted from the performance and they hadn't sold a single drink yet. The real work was just beginning. To Ethan's relief, the business side of the operation proceeded smoothly. His team handled the initial rush professionally, and the expanded menu proved popular with festival goers. By 1 p.m., they had already exceeded their projected sales for the first 3 hours. Blake, surprisingly, had become the booth's most effective salesperson. His charisma and social connections drawing customers who might otherwise have passed by. He'd also developed an unexpected talent for upselling, convincing nearly everyone to add pastries or upgrade to larger sizes. You should consider sales as a career, Ethan commented during a brief lull. Blake rolled his eyes. Please, this is just summer entertainment. I'm going into finance like my dad. Because that's what you want or because that's what's expected? The question seemed to catch Blake off guard. He busied himself reorganizing cups that didn't need reorganizing. Not everyone has a guaranteed corporate empire waiting for them, Miller. That's not an answer. Blake's response was cut short by Joshua Wilson's arrival. Panel prep time, he announced, checking his immaculate watch. We've got NPR and 3 regional business journals in attendance. As Ethan followed Joshua toward the festival's central pavilion, he spotted Zoe across the crowded fairgrounds, directing children at the craft booth. Their eyes met briefly before she deliberately turned away. Focus, Miller, Joshua said, following his gaze. The panel is your priority right now. Personal drama can wait. The business leaders panel was held in the festival's largest tent, with surprisingly professional lighting and sound equipment. Ethan was seated between the owner of a regional grocery chain and a tech entrepreneur who'd recently relocated her startup to Oak Valley. Mayor Wilson moderated, with Joshua managing logistics from the sidelines. To Ethan's surprise, his father slipped into the audience just as the discussion began, taking a seat near the back beside Eleanor Winters. Their presence added an unexpected layer of pressure to his performance. "Ethan," Mayor Wilson began with practiced affability, "your journey this summer has captured our community's imagination. What motivated you to start with something as humble as a lemonade stand?" It was a softball question, designed to let Ethan recite the now familiar narrative that the Wilsons had crafted around him. But sitting there under the lights, aware of his father watching, Ethan made a split-second decision to go off script. "Honestly, Mayor Wilson, it wasn't my idea at all." A murmur ran through the audience as Ethan continued. "My father challenged me to create a business without using family resources or connections. The lemonade stand was just the most accessible starting point with the limited capital I had available." Mayor Wilson's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "Remarkable humility, and yet you've achieved so much in such a short time." "With considerable help," Ethan emphasized, "from Mrs. Winters, who shared recipes and business wisdom, from Zoe Parker and her family, who supported my festival application before anyone knew who I really was, from community members who rebuilt my stand after the storm." Ethan found himself scanning the crowd as he spoke, relieved to see Zoe had slipped into the back of the tent. Her expression remained unreadable, but at least she was listening. "The real story isn't about me starting with a lemonade stand," Ethan continued, now fully off the prepared talking points. "It's about how a community responded when they thought one of their own needed help. The people of Oak Valley didn't rally around a miller. They rallied around a kid selling lemonade because they valued hard work and resilience." The tent had gone completely silent, the audience captivated by Ethan's unexpected candor. Even Mayor Wilson seemed momentarily at a loss for how to redirect the conversation back to his preferred narrative. "What I've learned this summer," Ethan concluded, "is that success isn't about who you are or what advantages you start with. It's about the relationships you build and the value you create for others." As the panel continued, Ethan maintained this approach, redirecting praise to others, emphasizing the collaborative nature of his success, and gently but firmly resisting Mayor Wilson's attempts to position him as the festival's central success. The story. From the back of the tent, James Miller watched with subtle pride as his son navigated the politically charged discussion with unexpected maturity. Beside him, Eleanor Winters nodded approvingly at particularly insightful comments. When the panel concluded, Ethan found himself surrounded by audience members and media representatives, all seeking follow-up comments. Joshua Wilson hovered nearby, clearly torn between satisfaction at the panel's success and concern about Ethan's deviation from the planned messaging. As Ethan finally extricated himself from the crowd, he found Zoe waiting near the tent exit, arms crossed defensively, but her presence itself a positive sign. "Nice speech," she said, her tone guarded. "Did you mean it, or was that just good PR?" "I meant every word," Ethan replied, "especially the part about you and your mom helping. Before you knew who I was, that meant more than you realize." Zoe studied him for a long moment. "You still let me believe you were something you weren't." "I know, and I'm sorry." Ethan took a deep breath. "The thing is, I'm still figuring out who I am apart from my family name. This summer was supposed to help with that. And did it?" There was genuine curiosity beneath Zoe's lingering hurt. "It's definitely clarified some things." Ethan gestured toward the bustling festival. "None of this would have happened without you. Not just the practical help, but you believed in what I was doing. It made me believe in it too." Zoe's expression softened slightly. "I've got to get back to the craft tent." "I understand. But," she added almost reluctantly, "I could use some lemonade first. Your booth is on the way." It wasn't forgiveness exactly, but it was an opening, an opportunity to rebuild what his deception had damaged. As they walked together through the crowded festival grounds, Ethan was acutely aware that repairing trust would take more than a single conversation. At the Mill Valley Refreshments booth, they found unexpected chaos. A line stretched far beyond their designated space, with Blake and the team struggling to keep pace with demand. "What happened?" Ethan asked as he jumped behind the counter, immediately falling back into operational mode. "Your panel," Blake explained breathlessly while mixing drinks. "They're broadcasting excerpts on the festival sound system between bands. Everyone wants the lemonade that built a community, or whatever you called it." The irony wasn't lost on Ethan. His attempt to deflect attention had somehow increased interest in his product. Mayor Wilson's media team had simply reframed his candor as part of the broader festival success story. As Ethan integrated back into the workflow, he noticed his father deep in conversation with the regional distributor's CEO near their booth. They appeared to be observing the operation while discussing something intently. "Your dad's been watching for about 20 minutes, Blake informed him, following his gaze. "That guy with him keeps taking notes." Before Ethan could process this information, Joshua Wilson appeared at his elbow. "Phenomenal panel outcome," he said with genuine enthusiasm. "We've already got requests for follow-up interviews. The stories, evolving from rich kid plays shop to next-generation business leader redefines community enterprise." "That wasn't my intention," Ethan began, but Joshua waved away his concerns. "Intention is irrelevant. Results are what matter." Joshua surveyed the bustling booth with satisfaction. "And the results are exceeding all projections. My father wants to discuss expanding your role in the Fall Business Development Initiative." The offer was simultaneously flattering and concerning. The Wilsons' continued interest suggested they saw long-term political value in their association with Ethan. As the afternoon progressed into evening, Mill Valley Refreshments continued its record-breaking sales. Ethan moved between operational oversight and obligatory networking, all while keeping an eye on his father's increasingly extensive conversations with various business leaders. Just before sunset, as the headline band was preparing to take the main stage, James Miller finally approached his son's booth. He waited patiently in line, declining offers to move ahead until he reached the front. "I'll take one of each signature flavor," he requested formally, as though he were any other customer. Blake, who was managing the register, froze momentarily before looking to Ethan for guidance. Ethan nodded, and Blake processed the order with exaggerated professionalism. "Impressive operation," James commented, as Ethan personally prepared his order. "Gregory Simmons thinks there's significant regional distribution potential. I noticed—" "You two talking," Ethan acknowledged, carefully measuring ingredients. "He's prepared to offer a development and distribution deal. Exclusive contract, minimum 5 years, with scaled production beginning this fall." James accepted the first of his drinks. Of course, that would require legitimate corporate structure, production facilities, supply chain management. "Well, beyond what I can handle alone," Ethan concluded, placing the last drink in a carrier. "Beyond what anyone could handle alone," James corrected. "Business at this scale requires teams, expertise, capital investment." The implied offer hung in the air between them. Before Ethan could respond, Blake interrupted. "Sorry, but we've got a situation." He pointed toward the festival entrance where a commotion was unfolding. "Someone claiming to be a health inspector is asking questions about our permits and ingredient sourcing." Ethan and James exchanged glances. Such an inspection, especially during a peak festival evening, was highly unusual and potentially devastating if it interrupted their sales momentum. "I'll handle it," Ethan decided, already moving out from behind the counter. "I'll come with you," his father said, placing his untouched drinks aside. "I have some experience with regulatory matters." As they approached the entrance, Ethan recognized Tom Thompson, Blake's father, deep in conversation with a municipal official. The timing and target seemed too convenient to be coincidental. "Mr. Thompson," James called pleasantly, "what a surprise to see you taking an interest in festival operations." Tom Thompson turned, his expression shifting from smugness to uncertainty at the sight of James Miller. "James, I was just expressing some concerns about proper permitting for these pop-up businesses. Public health considerations, you understand." Of course, James agreed smoothly, though typically such concerns would be addressed through proper channels, not by interrupting the town's signature event. The city official, clearly uncomfortable being caught between Oak Valley's most powerful businessman and the aggressive Mr. Thompson, began examining his clipboard with excessive interest. "I believe," James continued, "that you'll find Mill Valley Refreshments permits and health certifications are fully in order. My son is quite meticulous about regulatory compliance." The emphasis on "my son" was subtle but unmistakable. Tom Thompson's attempt at sabotage had not only failed, but had inadvertently created a public opportunity for James to demonstrate support for Ethan's venture. As the situation de-escalated and the official hurriedly confirmed that all paperwork was indeed in order, Ethan realized he was witnessing a masterclass in the kind of business politics that couldn't be learned from books or classroom exercises. "That was about Blake working for me, wasn't it?" Ethan asked quietly as they walked back toward the booth. "Tom Thompson has always resented what he couldn't earn himself," James replied. "He likely sees his son's enthusiasm for your venture as some form of betrayal." "Blake has been crucial to our success today," Ethan admitted. "He has instincts for this kind of work." "People often do, when given the right opportunities." James glanced at his son. "You've built something meaningful here, Ethan, far beyond what I anticipated when I issued my challenge." The rare moment of explicit approval caught Ethan off guard. "Thanks, Dad, but I still have decisions to make, don't I, about what happens after the festival?" "Indeed you do." James stopped, turning to face his son directly. "Regional distribution requires infrastructure. Simmons is offering resources, but he'll want control. The Wilsons are offering political support, but they'll want influence. Every opportunity comes with attachments." "Including your help?" Ethan asked pointedly. James smiled slightly. "Especially mine. The question isn't whether to accept help. It's what terms you're willing to accept and what you're willing to give in return." As they returned to the booth, Ethan found himself contemplating these choices while serving customers alongside. Blake, who seemed increasingly in his element as the evening progressed. Across the festival grounds, he could see Zoe watching from a distance, her craft booth now closed for the night. The festival's first day was nearly over, but the implications of what Ethan had built and the decisions about its future were just coming into focus. Whatever path he chose would involve navigating relationships and expectations far more complex than mixing the perfect lemonade. The final day of the Oak Valley Summer Festival dawned even hotter than the first, promising record attendance and challenging conditions for outdoor vendors. Ethan arrived at his booth before sunrise, accompanied by Blake and 2 other team members, to prepare for what they anticipated would be their busiest day yet. "The regional news mentioned your booth 3 times this morning," Blake reported, scrolling through his phone as they unloaded fresh supplies. "Social media engagement is up 400% from yesterday. We're going to be slammed." "Good thing we doubled our inventory," Ethan replied, checking the industrial refrigerator they'd rented for the weekend. "Though I'm still worried about afternoon rush. If we sell at yesterday's pace, we'll run out by 3 p.m. Blake hesitated before speaking again. "My dad called last night. He's pretty upset about what happened with the health inspector thing." "I figured he might be," Ethan said carefully. "That was a pretty transparent attempt at sabotage." "Yeah, well," Blake shrugged uncomfortably. "He said I should quit, that I'm making a fool of myself working for his business rival's son." Ethan stopped what he was doing. "And what did you tell him?" "That I've made more money in commission this weekend than I did all last month on my allowance," Blake admitted with a hint of defiance. "And that I'm learning more about actual business than I ever did listening to his complaints about clients." The candor was unexpected, and Ethan found himself re-evaluating his opinion of Blake for perhaps the 5th time that summer. The entitled bully of June had somehow evolved into a surprisingly competent and occasionally insightful business partner by August. "Your dad's wrong," Ethan said finally. "You've got real talent for this. You should consider—" He was interrupted by the arrival of Joshua Wilson, impeccably dressed despite the early hour and clearly buzzing with news. "There you are. Have you seen the Business Journal's feature?" They're calling you the face of conscious capitalism for the next generation. Joshua thrust his tablet forward, displaying an article headlined, Heir Apparent, How Ethan Miller Reimagined Community Business. The accompanying photo showed Ethan speaking at yesterday's panel, his expression earnest as he gestured toward the audience. My father wants you front and center for the closing ceremony tonight, Joshua continued. Regional media, state, business development officials, everyone who matters will be there. I appreciate the opportunity, Ethan began diplomatically, but today my priority has to be running my business. We're projecting record sales. Joshua's smile didn't falter, but his eyes hardened slightly. This isn't a request, Ethan. The festival committee, which approved your vendor application, if you recall, expects your participation. The implied threat was clear, if petty. I'll be there, Ethan conceded, but I'll need to ensure my booth is properly staffed first. As Joshua departed with a satisfied nod, Blake let out a low whistle. The Wilsons are really milking your success for all it's worth. They're politicians, Ethan shrugged. Everything's an opportunity for visibility. By mid-morning, their predictions of a rush were proving accurate. The line for Mill Valley refreshments stretched continuously, with festival attendees willing to wait 15 minutes or more for their signature drinks. Blake had implemented an efficient ordering system, taking advance orders from people in line to expedite service when they reached the counter. Around noon, Ethan spotted Eleanor Winters approaching, accompanied by the regional distributors, CEO Gregory Simmons. The older man observed the operation with evident interest, occasionally making notes on his phone. Young Mr. Miller, Eleanor called over the crowd. Mr. Simmons was hoping for a moment of your time. I'm a bit underwater right now, Ethan apologized, gesturing to the bustling booth. That's precisely why I'm interested, Simmons replied. Your product is generating remarkable consumer enthusiasm. I'd like to discuss formalizing the distribution proposal your father mentioned. Before Ethan could respond, a commotion at the front of the line drew his attention. Zoe had arrived with her mother, carrying a large cooler between them. Reinforcements, Mrs. Parker announced cheerfully. We harvested extra mint and lavender from our greenhouse this morning. Thought you might need it given the crowds. The gesture was unexpected and perfectly timed. Their herb supply had indeed been running dangerously low. You're a lifesaver, Ethan said with genuine gratitude. Both of you. It's good business, Mrs. Parker replied pragmatically. Your success brings people downtown, and people downtown eventually buy flowers. As they transferred the fresh herbs to the preparation area, Ethan noticed Zoe's deliberate focus on the task, avoiding direct conversation. Their fragile reconciliation clearly remained tentative. Zoe, he said quietly, would you mind covering the register for a few minutes? I need to speak with Mr. Simmons about a distribution opportunity. She looked up, surprised. You're letting me run your register, after everything? I trust you, Ethan said simply. You've earned that, regardless of everything else. Something shifted in Zoe's expression, not quite forgiveness, but perhaps the beginning of understanding. She nodded and moved toward the front of the booth. Ethan led Simmons and Eleanor to a quieter area behind the booth, where they could speak without shouting over the festival noise. Your operation has potential well beyond local festivals, Simmons began without preamble. My company can provide production facilities, distribution to 7 states, and marketing support. We'd take your recipes, standardize production, and scale rapidly. That sounds like significant resources, Ethan acknowledged. What would you want in return? Exclusive rights to the formulations, the Mill Valley brand, and your involvement as the face of the product line, Simmons replied. Standard arrangement would be 15% royalties on wholesale, with a guaranteed minimum annual payment. Ethan considered this. And operational control? Would shift to our product development team, Simmons said dismissively. You'd focus on promotion and brand representation while we handle the business end. The offer was financially attractive, but struck at something fundamental that had been forming in Ethan's mind throughout the summer. Before he could respond, his father appeared, beside Eleanor, having approached unnoticed during their conversation. Gregory, James nodded cordially. I see you're making your pitch directly. Your son's created something with genuine market potential, Simmons replied. With proper corporate structure and distribution channels, this could be a 7-figure brand within 18 months. James turned to Ethan. And what do you think of Mr. Simmons's proposal? It was a genuine question, Ethan realized, not leading or suggestive. His father was actually curious about his assessment. I think, Ethan said carefully, that it would destroy everything that makes Mill Valley special. Simmons frowned. I'm offering to expand your reach exponentially, to transform a summer project into a legitimate enterprise. But not my enterprise, Ethan countered. You'd be buying my recipes and my face while removing everything I've learned about what makes this business work. Community connection, local ingredients, adaptive customer response. Eleanor was smiling now, a knowing look directed at James, who remained impassive except for the barest hint of approval in his eyes. Perhaps we could structure something that preserves more of your creative input, Simmons offered, clearly sensing his standard proposal was being rejected. I appreciate your interest, Ethan said diplomatically, but I need to think about what direction makes sense for Mill Valley's future. This weekend has shown me there's significant potential here, but I'm not convinced mass production and corporate distribution is the right path. As Simmons departed with barely concealed disappointment, James remained behind with Eleanor. That was an exceptionally lucrative offer to decline, James observed neutrally. It was the wrong offer, Ethan replied. He wanted to turn Mill Valley into just another corporate brand. That's not what I've been building. And what have you been building? Eleanor asked with genuine curiosity. Ethan gestured toward the booth, where Blake was efficiently managing operations while Zoe handled transactions with a growing confidence. Something that creates value for everyone involved. Blake's discovering talents he didn't know he had. Zoe and her mother are forming new business partnerships. Our customers get products made with care and local ingredients. It's an ecosystem, not just a product line. James studied his son with new appreciation. So what's your counter-proposal? Before Ethan could answer, Mayor Wilson appeared, flanked by local media and festival officials. There he is, the young entrepreneur who's becoming the face of Oak Valley's economic renaissance. The next hour dissolved into interviews, photo opportunities, and carefully orchestrated festival promotion. Throughout it all, Ethan maintained the balance he'd struck the previous day, accepting recognition for his work while consistently emphasizing the collaborative nature of his success and deflecting the mayor's attempts to position him as a political asset. By late afternoon, Mill Valley Refreshments had indeed sold through their entire inventory, earlier than expected despite their doubled supplies. As they displayed sold-out signs to disappointed customers, Blake calculated their weekend revenue with undisguised excitement. We've cleared over $15,000, he announced when the final figures were tallied. After expenses, that's nearly $11,000 in profit for a lemonade stand. Not bad for a summer project, Ethan agreed, though his mind was already moving beyond the immediate success to longer-term possibilities. The festival's closing ceremony began at sunset on the main stage. As promised, Ethan was positioned prominently among local business leaders and political figures, with Mayor Wilson predictably using his achievements as a centerpiece of the program. When young Ethan Miller set up his modest lemonade stand in our town square earlier this summer, few could have predicted the ripple effects it would create, the mayor proclaimed to the assembled crowd. His enterprise embodies the values we cherish in Oak Valley: innovation, perseverance, and community spirit. From his seat on stage, Ethan could see his father and Eleanor in the audience, seated beside Zoe and her mother. Blake stood with his family nearby, looking uncomfortable as his father glared alternately at Ethan and James Miller. When it came time for Ethan to speak, he approached the microphone with a clarity of purpose that had been forming gradually throughout the summer and had crystallized during his conversation with Simmons. "Thank you, Mayor Wilson," he began conventionally enough. "When I started this journey, I was focused on a challenge my father had given me, to build something without relying on family resources or connections. What I didn't expect was how that simple challenge would evolve into something far more meaningful." Ethan paused, looking out at the faces of people who had become part of his unexpected journey. "I've been offered an opportunity to distribute Mill Valley products regionally, to scale up into a conventional corporate structure. It would be the logical next step in business growth. Mayor Wilson was nodding encouragingly, clearly assuming Ethan was building toward an announcement that would reflect well on Oak Valley's business environment. But I've decided to take a different path, Ethan continued. Mill Valley Refreshments will remain local and community-focused. Instead of mass production, we'll be establishing a cooperative business model with ownership shares available to those who've contributed to our success. The surprised murmurs from the audience matched the mayor's barely concealed dismay at this unexpected turn. Blake Thompson will oversee our social media and marketing strategies, Ethan announced, watching Blake's expression transform from shock to dawning pride. Zoe Parker and her mother will be our agricultural partners, expanding their greenhouse operations to supply our ingredients year-round. As he outlined his vision for a business that prioritized local impact over rapid expansion, Ethan could see his father watching with what appeared to be genuine respect, not just for the decision itself, but for the thoughtful reasoning behind it. The most valuable lesson I've learned this summer, Ethan concluded, is that true success isn't measured by profit margins alone, but by the strength of the relationships and community you build along the way. Mill Valley isn't just my company, it belongs to everyone who helped create it. The applause that followed was genuine, especially from the local residents who recognized their own values, reflected in Ethan's approach. Mayor Wilson, professional politician that he was, quickly adapted his closing remarks to embrace Ethan's vision as exactly the kind of innovative thinking that makes Oak Valley special. As the ceremony concluded and the festival's final musical act took the stage, Ethan found himself surrounded by well-wishers and potential business partners. Joshua Wilson approached with barely concealed frustration. "You could have mentioned your plan before the ceremony," he said tightly. "We had media briefed for a regional expansion announcement." "Sorry about that," Ethan replied, not entirely sincerely, "but I only finalized my decision today." "Your father put you up to this, didn't he?" Joshua pressed. "Some kind of Miller Enterprises strategy to maintain local control?" "Actually," James interjected smoothly, having approached during their conversation, "I recommended that Ethan accept Simmons's distribution offer. From a purely financial perspective, it was quite favorable." Joshua looked between father and son, visibly recalculating his assumptions. "Then why?" "Because Ethan has developed his own business philosophy," James explained with evident pride. "One that values relationships and community impact alongside profitability. An approach that may well prove more sustainable in the long term than conventional corporate models." As Joshua retreated to confer with his father, Ethan turned to James with surprise. "You really recommended I take Simmons' offer?" "It was the conventional choice," James acknowledged, "but I've learned this summer that you have an unconventional mind. Your mother would be proud of the decision you made today." The reference to Sarah, so rare in their conversations, carried emotional weight that left Ethan momentarily speechless. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Zoe, who approached with determined steps. "So I'm your agricultural partner now?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "Interesting, considering you didn't actually discuss this with me first." "I was planning to," Ethan admitted sheepishly. "But when the moment came to announce my decision, it just felt right. If you're not interested—" "I didn't say that," Zoe interrupted. "Mom's already calculating how many additional greenhouse panels we'd need. She thinks it's brilliant." "And you?" Zoe considered him carefully. "I think you're still figuring out the boundary between confidence and arrogance. But I also think your heart's in the right place, which counts for something." "Enough to give me another chance?" Ethan asked, the question encompassing both business and personal implications. "We'll see," Zoe replied with the ghost of a smile. "Partners need to trust each other. That takes time to rebuild." As she walked away, Blake approached, still looking slightly dazed. "Did you seriously just make me your marketing director?" "In front of the entire town?" "Co-director," Ethan corrected. "And only if you want the job. You've got natural talent for it." Blake shook his head in disbelief. "My father's going to lose his mind." "Probably," Ethan agreed. But at some point, you have to decide whose approval actually matters to you. The festival was winding down now. Families heading toward parking lots as vendors packed up their remaining wares. Eleanor Winters appeared one last time, linking her arm through James's with the familiarity of old friendship. "Well, young Mr. Miller," she said warmly, "your summer challenge has certainly yielded unexpected results. What will you do with the remaining weeks before school resumes?" "Establish the cooperative properly," Ethan replied without hesitation. "Work out equity, structures, operational roles, supply chains for full production." "Already thinking like a CEO," Eleanor observed, "though perhaps a different kind than your father anticipated creating." James shook his head, smiling slightly. "I set out to teach Ethan about business fundamentals. Instead, he's developed an entirely new approach to community enterprise. The best lessons," Eleanor said wisely, "are the ones we didn't know we needed to learn." As they walked together toward the parking area, Ethan found himself reflecting on the extraordinary journey of the past 3 months. From a simple lemonade stand born of necessity to a community-based cooperative with genuine growth potential, none of it had unfolded as he had expected. His father had been right about one thing. The true value of the experience wasn't in the profits generated or skills acquired, but in the deeper understanding of how business could function as a positive force within a community. The mockery that had initially driven him to prove himself had transformed into something far more meaningful. A vision for success that measured wealth not just in dollars, but in relationships strengthened and opportunities created. As they reached their car, James placed a hand on his son's shoulder. "You know," he said quietly, "your mother always said that a business reflects the values of its founder. I'm curious to see what Mill Valley becomes under your leadership." It was perhaps the greatest compliment his father had ever paid him, not just approval of what he had done, but genuine interest in what he would do next. As Ethan looked back across the fairgrounds, now emptying as the festival concluded, he felt a profound sense of possibility. The summer challenge was officially complete, but the real work and the real lessons were just beginning.